Welcome to this short webinar we've put together that we've called We Can't Help You, Challenging Homelessness Gatekeeping in Practice. So, my name is Gareth. I am one of the trainers here at Society Matters, if you've not come across us before. And if I may, just before we get into it, if I may give you just a little bit of background about this session and kind of who we are and what we do. So Society Matters is the trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead. We are actually one of the largest citizens advice in the country, but we are its trading subsidiary. So what I do day to day is we deliver a range of courses on various different kind of social welfare issues. So think housing, think debt, think immigration, think homelessness, think universal credit. It's citizens advice. So if you can think of it, then we probably cover it. But we do try and feed the knowledge and the experience that we have as advisors into sessions like this today. But what's unique about us is that ultimately all of the profits that we make actually get gifted back to Citizens Advice Gateshead to help sort of fund the various projects that it has and enable our advisors to do the wonderful work that they do. Now, if I may, just a quick bit of housekeeping. It looks like everybody has done this already. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded. So if you've got your camera on, if you do want to be on camera for the recording, do feel free to turn it off. It looks like you've done this already. If I can ask you also, please try to keep your microphones on mute unless you've got a question you want to ask. It's just that the background noise can be a little bit off-putting is all. We're not going to be taking any breaks because this is just an hour-long session. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk for around about 45 minutes thereabouts, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for a bit of a Q&A. I will stop the recording at that point. So we will be able to, if you don't want to sort of ask questions in the recording, you will be able to ask them a bit more privately at the end. If you have any questions at any point, hopefully you can tell I'm about as intimidating as a cold drink on a hot day. So if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to just take yourselves off mute or pop a message in the chat, whatever is easier. As I said, you will get a copy of this recording and the slides as well. They will be sent to you. If not later today, it'll be tomorrow. So just keep an eye out on your emails. So, what are we going to be talking about today then? This idea of gatekeeping. So what does homelessness gatekeeping actually look like in practice? We're going to talk about why it happens. We know it happens, there's no point denying it, but why does it happen and what are the reasons behind it? Where does that gatekeeping, where does it come from? We're going to talk about the legal reality, so the legal underpinnings that we can perhaps use to challenge gatekeeping versus maybe the frontline experience of what we see at Citizens Advice Gateshead or maybe what you see in your own rules. We're going to talk about how to challenge gatekeeping confidently and effectively, so what can we do to actually confront it and challenge it, and we're going to talk about steps that we can take to support clients to make a valid homelessness application. All right. So I'm just curious, and like I said, feel free to take yourselves to either take yourselves off mute or pop a message in the chat. How would you guys define gatekeeping? What is it? What do you think? Or what does it look like? So you want to take yourselves off mute or pop a message in the chat, whatever is easier. Oh, I can see someone's typing there, thank you. I'll give it a sec. If it's easier, do feel free, by the way, to just take yourselves off mute, guys. Ooh. Restricting access to services or to help. Yeah, absolutely. Denying somebody the right to access the services that we think they have a perfectly legitimate right to access. Bottlenecking. Oh, I like that phrase. Thank you for that, Claire. I'll have to remember that one. I like that. Sorry, I can see somebody else typing. Like I said, if it's easier, feel free to just take yourselves off mute if it's quicker. No, it looks like they've stopped. Well, actually, I think we've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I do like that phrase, bottlenecking. I'm going to have to remember that one. Gatekeeping is when a local authority prevents or discourages someone from making a homelessness application or delays taking one instead of accepting the application and making the inquiries that they are required to by law. So that could be refusing to take an application without certain documents. It could be telling someone to come back when you're actually homeless. It could be delaying acceptance until they're actually evicted. Could be refusing to take an application because we're making assumptions about have they made themselves intentionally homeless? Have they not done something that they could have done that would thereby prevent their homelessness? Maybe we're making assumptions about whether they are priority need or not priority need, as the case may be. Maybe we're making assumptions about the local connection that the person might or might not have, or their eligibility about homelessness assistance. So we might be making assumptions about, say, their immigration status, for example. Now, the issue that I personally used to come across is gatekeeping doesn't always look hostile, right? It doesn't always look like, and no, sorry, you can't have that. It doesn't necessarily look hostile or aggressive or shouty or confrontational. Very often it can sound reasonable. It might be framed as a kind of administrative issue, or sorry, it's just policy. It's just what we do. Well, sorry, but that doesn't make it lawful. I'm going to give you an example, if I may. So there's an organisation called Centrepoint who do a lot of work around homelessness, particularly in relation to young people, kind of 16 to 25-year-olds. And they published a report recently. And in that report, they gave an example of, I think she was a 24-year-old woman. She was 6 months pregnant, and she contacted Centrepoint after being made homeless because her family had asked her to leave. Now, she spent the night with absolutely nowhere to go. She was just travelling on buses just to keep herself warm. She approached our local council, but they refused to help her because she was told that she wouldn't receive access to any kind of emergency or interim accommodation until she had an assessment. Now, according to Section 188 of the Housing Act, prior to an assessment, if the local authority actually have reason to believe that an applicant might be homeless, eligible for assistance, and have priority need, they must make sure that the applicant is able to access emergency accommodation while making inquiries into the situation. So in the case of this young woman, she was pregnant, therefore, yes, she has a priority need. She was eligible to receive support through her immigration status. She had a local connection to the council because she'd been living in the area. That should have been enough to trigger the duty for emergency accommodation. Now, luckily, in her case, Centrepoint intervened and were able to sort her issue, for want of a better phrase, but it should never have gotten to that point. I'm just curious if you're happy to say, have any of you come across gatekeeping in your rules or situations that you think might have been gatekeeping? All the time. All the time. Can you give us an example if that's all right, Claire?
Sorry, give me five. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. No bother, thank you.
Basically, I work as a welfare and benefit advisor with sometimes housing being involved because obviously they go hand in hand at times. And I was working on a case of a woman who was having domestic abuse, wasn't from a partner but a family member. And basically, she was adequately homed in a one-bedroom house, but a violent family member knew where she lived, and they wouldn't rehouse her because they said she was adequately homed.
Even though she was at risk of domestic abuse.
Yeah, in all sorts of abuse she suffered, and they were saying that they put her on a bandit, and eventually a band B, I think, and then they said she would do an external move. But from what I was hearing, even with that, they're saying that she's still waiting to hear from Move It, and they've not given her any emergency accommodation whatsoever.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. That sounds terrible. I mean, I would challenge that for various reasons. I mean, I don't understand why she was a priority B, which would imply this priority A, and especially with it being, fleeing domestic abuse. I find that quite shocking. And then refusing any kind of accommodation in the interim, I would certainly be looking to challenge that. Yeah.
Okay,
But
that's good to know.
yeah. No worries, no worries. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. Refusing emergency accommodation on Friday afternoon, reluctance to complete housing application forms. Yeah, I'll have to say, Sheila, and again, thank you for sharing that. I'm not entirely surprised. There can be real issues around access to services, particularly on sort of Friday afternoons. A lot of services might only be open on Monday to Friday. All it takes is that one person on the desk, if I may stereotype slightly, you think, oh, it's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I can't be bothered with this. Can you come back on Monday? Well, great, but where does that leave that person in the interim? Yeah. So, where do we stand at the moment then, just to give us some context? So again, these statistics are from Centrepoint, the organisation that I mentioned earlier. Now, if I'm honest, there is very little data on the scope of gatekeeping. And as I mentioned earlier, Centrepoint helps specifically young people from the ages of about 16 to 25. That means that in all likelihood, this is a vast underrepresentation of the true picture. But just to give you an idea, Centrepoint's helpline recorded 449 instances of gatekeeping between August 2024 and July of 2025. Gatekeeping was reported in 44%, nearly half of all local authorities mentioned by young people, 132 and 299. Of those gatekeeping instances reported, 40% of contacts were female, 33% were male, and the most common cause of homelessness, gatekeeping and in instances of homelessness that were reported, 38% were because of breakdowns in family relationships, 16% were because of domestic abuse, 12% were because of evictions. Now imagine that, right? Your family have just kicked you out for all intents and purposes. You might be living on your own. Well, I say living on your own, but you might be on your own, supporting yourself for the first time in your life. You go for support. Sorry, we can't help you because XYZ. Where does it leave that person? You're fleeing domestic abuse. Sorry, we can't help you. Where am I going to go? Am I going to have to go back to my abusive partner? Eviction. So I'm either threatened with homelessness or I am now homeless. Sorry, we can't help you. Now, as I said, this will be an underrepresentation because Centrepoint only work with specifically 16 to 25-year-olds. So this is not the true picture. It will be worse than this. Is anyone surprised by any of those statistics? Or not surprised? Has to be a lot higher than those numbers reported. Yeah, it will be, Claire. It will be higher than that, certainly. No, if I'm honest, the one that maybe got me a little bit was this figure around 44. Ooh, where's my mouse gone? 44% of all local authorities, so nearly half of all local authorities. I'd like to think that given, homelessness support is a statutory duty, that local authorities will be abiding by that, but in some instances, no, they are not. But by and large, personally, I have to say I wasn't entirely surprised other than that. Now, in terms of, like we said, just where we stand at the moment, just to give you an idea, just sort of setting the scene for the moment. We've got some case studies, if you like. So firstly, there was a council, we are not naming them. An investigation found that in one 6-month period, the council closed around 2/3 of cases, 216 out of 326, without taking a formal application by demanding excessive information up front. So they just closed the cases outright. Didn't even take the application. They have a statutory duty to do so. In a second council, there was a case where homeless applicants were sent away, again without any kind of application, instead being made to sign up to a housing options action plan. So, sorry, you're homeless. We're not going to do this, but we're going to do this instead. Well, it's not going to relieve my homelessness, is it? Thinking about London specifically, a 2022 report highlighted widespread gatekeeping across London, including turning away victims of domestic abuse and providing unsuitable temporary accommodation to avoid long-term duties. A lot of housing officers don't even know anything about housing. They're not even qualified, sadly. Yeah. There are some fantastic housing officers out there in the country, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. But what I'm
but
saying is you don't even need
yeah,
a qualification to be a housing officer.
yeah, you
So a
beat me
lot of
to it.
don't understand domestic abuse, don't understand relationship breakdowns and the effects on it, don't even understand things like gatekeeping or do the very basic. I'm not saying they're very good, they just don't have any, they're not coming from that. They're not even really trained.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's the kind of thing. Say if you're working in the housing sector, for instance, you'd like to think there was some kind of regulation, if that's the right word, or something like that. But
Standard.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But as you say, you know, anyone could potentially. But then where does the training come from? The development, the knowledge, the experience. Now you might build it up on the job. You know, that's what happens with your job naturally, isn't it? You build your experience and so on. But if you're new to the role for the first time, where do you start from? Where does that come from? And then where does that leave the people that you support? Hmm?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Claire. So, why is gatekeeping happening? Why do you think gatekeeping is happening? Where does it come from? Lack of homes, certainly could be. There was a real shortage of, well, I mean, you might say housing stock generally, but thinking specifically about, say, council housing and so on, there is a real shortage. Do some people think that it's easier to just turn the people away so that we can manage the stock that we have? Margaret Thatcher. I'm not going to get political if I may, so you can read into that as much or as little as you like. Staff capacity, certainly. Uh-huh. What if you are meant to have, I don't know, 20 people in your caseload and instead you've got 50? How are you going to manage that? Higher migration? Potentially. That's certainly the impression that you might get from, say, certain elements of the media, for example, without wanting to get too political. Higher rents, yes, I would totally agree. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the benefit system, for example, but housing benefit rates, what's called the local housing allowance rates that determine the amount of, say, housing benefit or housing element of UC that you get, were frozen for several years. Then they were unfrozen for about a year. Then they've been refrozen again. And for all of that time, as the local housing allowance rates have stayed where they are, rents have just gone up and up and up and up and up. There was a report in, I think it was The Guardian I was reading a few months ago, that if you are renting your property and you're paying for it through just housing benefit or housing element of UC, only about 3% of properties across England are actually affordable to you entirely through housing benefit or housing element. Where does that shortfall leave you? How are you going to cover that shortfall? Can you? Because if you can't, you end up losing the property, you end up homeless, then you come to your local authority for homelessness support, and then potentially you face gatekeeping. I would argue that we actually have a rent crisis rather than a property crisis or homes crisis. It's an argument I'm certainly sympathetic to. Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Claire. Cuts to council budgets and emergency accommodation. Is that EA&T? Is that emergency accommodation and temporary accommodation there? Sorry, Jenna. But I would agree with that, certainly. As a proportion of their budgets, councils spend huge amounts of money on emergency and temporary accommodation, certainly. So maybe if we're being sympathetic, if we're being diplomatic, does that oh, I thought so, thank you. Maybe does that gatekeeping come from wanting to try and preserve the funds that they have, for want of a better phrase? So I can see one or two people are still typing. Excuse me. Perks the job, sorry, I've got a bit of a cough, so you'll have to bear with me, losing my voice. I'll leave it there for now. So, the proportion of households living in social housing has halved since the start of the 1980s. So maybe to go back to what someone mentioned earlier, maybe it is something to do with Thatcher. But in terms of why gatekeeping is happening, I think we've touched on quite a few of those already. It's the lack of housing supply. It's the pressures that local authority face in regards to paying for temporary accommodation, as well as the budgets more broadly. Misunderstanding, misapplication of the law. A lot of people have been and can be stuck in emergency accommodation, can't free up where it's needed. Yeah, there are stories of, families living for months at a time in B&Bs, for instance. What effect is that going to have on their life? The children's education, the likelihood of actually getting finding employment or staying in employment. Your home really is the foundation for the rest of your life. If you don't have that, how are you meant to build anything else? If you'll forgive me getting on my soapbox a bit too much there. We definitely have a social housing shortage in Leeds, massive pressure on the system. Yeah. And also I've got friends who live in Leeds, and actually they would say very similar. So for me, I'm not entirely surprised by that. And I don't think, sadly, that that's a problem that's unique to Leeds, unfortunately. But yes, but we've touched on quite a few of those issues. Now, in terms of some tactics when it comes to gatekeeping, how do people actually gatekeep? What does it look like? Well, firstly, I would argue that there are arguments to be made around the high barriers to entry for homelessness support. Wrong, unjustly high barriers to entry. For example, requiring say, Section 21 notice before accepting an application, even if the person has already been evicted or is fleeing domestic violence. I have seen that in practice with clients in the past. Refusing to accept applications because the applicant lacks maybe a passport or a tenancy agreement or 5 years of the address history. Directing survivors of domestic abuse to, oh, sorry, just come back later. Can't help you right now. Can you come back in 2 hours? Can you just go back to your abusive partner for a couple of hours and just come back later on when such and such is in? Thank you. Unfortunately, again, I have seen that with clients in the past. Or they've been told to go through more of a homelessness prevention process rather than providing immediate emergency housing. So, I can't stay in the house that I'm living in because it's not safe because my partner is threatening to kill me, for example, if you forgive me being blunt. Okay, we're not going to give you emergency housing, but we're just going to go through this process so that you can actually stay in that house. That's not what I need, though. You're not hearing me. You're not listening to me. It might be, though, that they are applying the law incorrectly. So turning away people who don't have, say, 6 months residency in the borough, even though local connection rules might not necessarily apply to all applicants. If, for example, you are a care leaver or if you are leaving domestic abuse. It might be refusing to help people based on just a misunderstanding of their immigration status or assuming that someone isn't eligible for support. In your experience, what else do you think gatekeeping might look like? See, there's people typing, so I'll give it a second. Like I say, folks, if it's easier, please do feel free to just take yourselves off mute and chat away if that's easier. Or do you think that covers it quite nicely? We've put you on a waiting list, knowing far well you don't have a chance of getting anywhere or even lower banding when you need to be in a higher banding. Yeah, again, I've seen that with clients in the past where they are put into the wrong band. Well, that has implications for the properties that they can say bid on and so on, and then they're just stuck. Not giving someone priority for housing until the landlord has escalated to court. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Lauren. It shouldn't even need to go to that point. That right there, textbook gatekeeping. Yeah. Simple as that. So, the legal reality then. So, homelessness application happens when someone is homeless or threatened with homelessness in the next 56 days and seeking help or seeking accommodation. Strictly speaking, there is no requirement for a form, for it to be in writing, for there to be evidence at the point of application. There is no requirement for that. It should quite simply be enough for me to go to my local council offices and say, hello, I'm homeless or I'm threatened with homelessness. I don't have somewhere to go and I need help. That should be enough. There is no magic form. Very often, though, that is where gatekeeping occurs. Like we said, can you come back later? Have you got your Section 21 notice? Have you got your passport? Very often, that is where that gatekeeping occurs. But there is no, like we said, there's no magic form. It really is as simple as that. With that in mind, then, spotting gatekeeping. So, like we said, I'm told to come back later. Sorry, we're busy, or such and such, the person that you need, oh, they're not here right now. So, can you come back in 2 hours? Sorry, I'm going to need all that evidence up front. Sorry, we're just not going to take that application. Or, okay, yeah, thanks for that. And then they don't do anything about that. They don't do anything with that application. So there isn't actually any kind of assessment beyond that. So then, is this gatekeeping? So we've got an example here. So we've changed some details for GDPR and so on, but by and large, this is it. So we've got Leanne. Leanne was a single parent with a 5 she was private renting. She had a valid Section 21 notice and expired in 21 days. She had no rent arrears of any kind. She was working part-time. She received universal credit. She attends the housing office with she takes her eviction notice with her, explains she can't afford to move privately, she has no family locally, and the housing officer tells her, you've still got time left on the notice though. We don't actually get involved until the bailiffs come knocking, so can you come back when you're actually homeless? She leaves without any paperwork being taken or any kind of follow-up appointment offered. One, do you think this is gatekeeping and why? And two, what duty do you think should have been triggered and why? People typing away, so I'll give it a second. Jenna, you're saying yes, this is gatekeeping. She's at risk of homelessness, should be given priority need and a duty because she has a child. Yes, to gatekeeping, no application, no information taken. Leanne is classed as threatened homelessness. This should have triggered the homeless prevention duty. Absolutely. Firstly, yes, you're absolutely right. This is gatekeeping, textbook. As for what duty is triggered, I would say the prevention duty in this case, which again, you're absolutely right. She is threatened with homelessness within the next 56 days. She's got a valid Section 21 notice and it expires in 21 days. So yes, she is threatened with homelessness. And those of you who said it, you are absolutely right. She would be priority need. She has a child. She has a 5-year-old daughter. So yes, she should be a priority need. She should actually be offered interim kind of relief accommodation, even while the local authority make further inquiries. She should be getting emergency accommodation. So what is actually unlawful here? Well, firstly, they haven't actually taken her application. They refused to take it altogether. You know, no paperwork was taken, no appointment was offered. They haven't actually done anything. That right there, that refusal to take an application, that is a breach of Section 183 of the 1996 Housing Act. They haven't made inquiries, like we said, there's been no follow-up appointment, there's been no paperwork taken. That right there breaches Section 184 of the Housing Act. They haven't accepted the prevention duty. They haven't actually done anything for her. They've also failed to consider interim accommodation if priority needs exists. Well, it does exist, that priority need. She has a child. There is clearly then a reason to believe that priority need may exist. That should trigger then, under Section 188 of the Housing Act, interim accommodation. And that threshold actually is a very low threshold because the local authority just need reason to believe that she is priority need. Well, she's got a 5-year-old daughter. So even while they are making those further inquiries, they should be offering her emergency accommodation, whether that's a hotel or a B&B or whatever it might be, but they should be doing something. It should trigger that prevention duty. It should trigger that Section 188 interim accommodation. As well as that, they said, sorry, we don't actually get involved until the bailiffs are due. Come back when you're actually homeless. Nope, sorry, that's unlawful as well. The trigger is 56 days. It is not eviction day. So then, how can we challenge gatekeeping? Oh, we've talked about that. How can we challenge gatekeeping? Right. Firstly, be confident. Be clear about your language. All right. My client is making a homelessness application today. Please record that I've approached today and confirm this in writing. If you're refusing to take my application, confirm that in writing as well. So like I mentioned earlier, you've refused to take my application today for XYZ reason. You have not offered me interim accommodation under Section 188, even though I have explained to you that I am a priority need because I have a child, or I'm pregnant, or I have a health condition. You have refused to accept my housing application, my homelessness application, sorry. That is a breach of Section 183 of the 1996 Housing Act. Be specific. Be polite, but be firm. We would always recommend putting it in writing, ideally an email, because at least then we'll have a record of our communication. Right? Like I've just done there, refer to those duties under legislation. Do your homework. So like we said, failure to make inquiries if they haven't done anything, that's a breach of Section 184. So you have failed to make inquiries under Section 184 of the 1996 Housing Act. You have refused to take my application. This is a clear breach of Section 183 of the 1996 Housing Act. I've explained to you that I'm a priority need because XYZ, and therefore I should be offered interim accommodation under Section 188. Escalate where we need to, use complaints, challenge it legally if need be, whether that even comes to things like, say, a judicial review stage down the line. Right? Be clear about the next steps, though. So will you be considering interim accommodation? I've explained to you that I'm priority need, so what are you going to do about it? Now, in practice, yes, this might be difficult for somebody in this situation. If I have just been made homeless and I am coming to my local authority for homelessness assistance, I'm probably going to have a lot of stuff to think about beyond, checking particular sections of the 1996 Housing Act. But that's why I say, as people who advise, or as staff who advise those clients, it's important that we know our stuff so that we can point them in the right directions. How would you guys challenge gatekeeping, or how have you done in the past? Is there anything that springs to mind? Get advice from Shelter? Yeah, absolutely, Jenna. Shelter do some fun. So I imagine we're all familiar, but if you're not, Shelter are a fantastic housing charity. They do actually have a specialist helpline that you can ring if you need advice and if you need to speak to someone. So it might just be getting advice from somewhere like Shelter. Could be other places like citizens advice, for instance. Accompany a client to the housing office. Don't leave until we have been seen. Escalate to the line manager of the housing ombudsman. Yeah, absolutely, folks. So there are routes that we can go down. Certainly. Now, when it comes to supporting clients themselves, there are some things that we can do to prepare them as best as we can. But firstly, I think it's really important that we recognize that the emotional impact that it can have on clients, like we said, you know, your home is your foundation for the rest of your life at the end of the day. So if you're made homeless, well, there's that foundation, shook, gone, whatever you want to call it. What emotional state is that person really going to be in? Are they going to be in a position where they're able to, you know, advocate for themselves in that way? Maybe that's why they're coming to say it to us at Citizens Advice, or maybe one of you guys. Do we need to think about how we respond to that person's, and I use this word deliberately, but how we respond to that person's trauma? You know, do we need to keep our language simple? Do we need to think about where we are meeting them? Do we need somewhere quiet? Do we need to prepare them beforehand? Because if they're making a homelessness application, well, they're going to have to give some kind of explanation of why it is that they are seeking that homelessness assistance. Do we need to manage their expectations? Like for a time, I remember, you know, there was a time where everybody thought, well, if I'm homeless, oh, I'll just get a council house and I'll be fine. The council will give us a flat. Well, it's not that simple. So do we need to manage their expectations? Do we need to encourage persistence? Yes, people might need to be persistent. If they face gatekeeping, for instance, well, they're just going to say, no, sorry, can't help you, and that's going to be the end of the road. Maybe we need to be persistent in chasing that up and making sure they get that support in, say, reminding the council of the statutory duties or the particular sections of the Housing Act. Encourage persistence. Document interactions, maybe fairly self-explanatory. We want a record, because if we do need to escalate it further to the housing ombudsman or a judicial review or whatever it might be, yeah, we're going to need evidence of what we've done, what we've said, what the local authority have said, what they've said they're going to do and what they might not have done or what they might have refused to do. We need documentary evidence to back that up. So then, what are our takeaways? Well, gatekeeping is, I hesitate to use the word common. I don't know how I feel about the word common, but it is challengeable. It's not set in stone. We can challenge it. We can do something about it if we disagree. The application, the homelessness application itself, it's about the intention. It's not about paperwork. It's not about your evidence. It's about the intention. I am homeless and I need help. Please help me. That's it. The more confident, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Claire. Don't take no for an answer if there's a real need. Absolutely. The more confident we can be in our understanding of the law and our rights and, say, the council's obligations, the more likely we are to get that better outcome for our clients or service users or whatever you want to call them. Ideally, as soon as possible. Early intervention, it does prevent escalation. The sooner we can get involved, or the sooner the person has an understanding of their rights and so on, we might not even need to escalate it to, say, the ombudsman or whoever it might be. But crucially, just manage their expectations. Like I said, once upon a time, I think there was a bit of a stereotype, if I may be slightly stereotypical, that, you know, I'm homeless, so I'll get a council house. They'll just give me a council house and I'll be fine. And that's just not really the reality of what we see necessarily when it comes to homelessness assistance and gatekeeping. Now, this has been a little bit of a taster session for a brand new course that we've put together at Society Matters around supporting people with homelessness application. It is a full day course. It is now CPD accredited. And what that course will do, as I said, this has been a bit of a taster session for the time being. It's all about supporting people through that homelessness application process. So how do we make a homelessness application? What are the duties the local authority has? Where do priority need and vulnerability fit into that? How do we challenge gatekeeping? All right, how can we support people through the assessments and the decision process? It's particularly useful, if I may say, if you're working with anybody or people who might face eviction, domestic abuse survivors, might be leaving institutions like prison or hospital that might be at risk of homelessness. Now, excuse me. Alongside that, though, we do also have another course that we offer. We've been offering for several years now, but specifically around housing and homelessness. So our new course deals with homelessness applications. We have another course, again, full day CPD accredited, that deals specifically with housing and homelessness. All right, so it's about different types of tenancies that exist and housing rights. It has been updated in light of some upcoming changes to the section, well, the abolition rather of Section 21. So we'll talk about things like homelessness eligibility and the Section 8 eviction processes, as well as welfare benefits linked to housing costs, things like housing benefit, housing element of universal credit. Yeah, absolutely no problem at all, Claire. What I will do very quickly, I will just pop a link in the chat. This is just to our course webpage, the webpage that has a list of our courses. You'll find a bit more details about all of them on there, but there is information about the housing course and our new homelessness application course as well, specifically if you want to find out a little bit more. When I send the email as well, I will also include a copy of our shiny new training booklet that has some information in there if you want to find out more. All right. So just very quickly before we get to the Q&A and before I stop the recording, just to make you guys aware, this again has just been a short webinar put together around gatekeeping and homelessness. Our next free webinar, our stress-free, will be around PIP and mental health. 5 things that everyone supporting claimants need to know, because there are a lot of misconceptions around PIP and mental health specifically. That will be on the 13th of May, Wednesday the 13th of May. I'm just popping a link in the chat there to Eventbrite if you want to book onto that. All right. And the last thing before I stop the recording, rather, is that I'm just going to pop a short link in the chat, a link in the chat, sorry, to a very short feedback form. Would really appreciate you guys taking just 2 minutes to let me know what you thought of the session today. Very much appreciated.